Booba and the Missing Cheese. One day, Booba falls asleep in his favourite yellow armchair. It is big and cosy, with a soft turquoise pillow. Booba sleeps blissfully. Suddenly, he turns to the side and rolls on the floor head over heels. Sleepy Booba looks around. Suddenly, his eyes wide open. There is a telescope next to the armchair. Booba runs up to it and begins to look around, eager to look at everything around him. Booba points the telescope at the closed fridge and sees a large piece of cheese hidden in there right through the door. Booba rubs his eyes. He can't believe his luck. Booba runs to the fridge, opens the door and sees the cheese inside. It lies on a tray covered with a transparent lid. Who knew the telescope was a magic telescope? Booba pulls the tray out of the fridge. What luck! He is just hungry. Suddenly, he is distracted by a quiet chirping in his ear. Booba turns around to see a toy drone. It hovers next to Booba. Its round viewfinder is pointed directly at him. Booba hurriedly puts the cheese back in the fridge. He hasn't got time for cheese when there is a new toy in the house. Booba tries to attract the attention of the drone to play with it, but it doesn't work. The drone does not react to him in any way. Then Booba looks around and sees Spike with a remote control. The drone obediently performs all Spike's commands. Booba gets upset and sticks his tongue out at the drone. He doesn't really want to play with such a meanie. Nearby, Lula draws a vase with sunflowers. The vase stands on a round table directly in front of her. Lula waves her brush at the easel like a real artist. Booba comes over to admire her work. Lula's sunflower painting is almost finished, but the picture is missing one tiny thing. Lula thinks about the finishing touches. Booba decides to help her. He goes to the vase with the sunflowers and turns it slightly so that the light from the windows illuminate the flowers better. Lula nods gratefully. However, Booba does not stop there. He begins to turn the table with the vase this way and that way until the vase falls. Lula gets upset and asks him to leave. Booba's actions made Lula lose track, and the sunflowers in her picture look all wonky. Gloomy Booba wanders off. At the big wall-mounted TV in the living room, Mr. Beak plays a dancing game. A cute teddy bear on the screen moves energetically. Mr. Beak enthusiastically copies every move he makes. Mr. Beak notices Booba's interest and asks him to join in. But Booba finds the dance boring, so he makes up his own dance. Booba gets up on his hands and rolls around the room doing cartwheels. Mr. Beak shakes his head. Silly Booba. Meanwhile, Booba rolls up behind the couch when Noodle has built a tower of building blocks. Booba falls into the tower and knocks it over. Ow! Noodle, wearing a construction helmet, sadly looks at the mess. Just think of that! So much work and all for nothing. Booba hurriedly rebuilds the tower, but he cannot build anything solid. On the contrary, he only makes it worse. Noodle is very angry with Booba. He jumps out of his seat and starts throwing the cubes at Booba. Booba barely manages to escape in time. After catching his breath, he feels exhausted. Booba gets back into his favourite yellow armchair and falls asleep instantly. Booba has slept for a long time. He wakes up to a loud rumbling in his stomach. It is time for something to eat. Booba gets out of his armchair and points the telescope at the fridge again. This time, the fridge door is open, and there is only the unfinished crust of cheese left on the tray, while the cheese itself is gone. Booba panics and runs to the fridge. In front of the fridge, on the floor, he sees a footprint. The foot is long. There are 3 toes. Something seems familiar. Booba takes out his magnifying glass and carefully examines the footprint. But he cannot remember whose it might be. Booba decides to solve the mysterious disappearance of cheese at all costs. The footprints on the floor leads him to the easel. Lula stands nearby, puzzled as to where the new painting on the easel comes from. The picture shows a big, beautiful and very appetizing piece of cheese. Booba looks closely. Well, that's who has eaten the cheese from the fridge. It's Lula. Lula shakes her head. She didn't do anything like that. She too becomes curious about where the cheese has disappeared. Booba and Lula team up to find the cheese thief together. They go back to the fridge. Lula puts her paw on the footprint left by the culprit. Her paw is much smaller. Who could it be? Lula thinks. Suddenly, Lula and Booba notice a green feather with a red tip. It falls on the floor not too far from the fridge. Booba picks it up and tickles Lula. They both have a lot of fun. And only then Booba and Lula realise that the feather is new evidence. It's Mr. Beak, they think simultaneously. That's who ate the cheese. They rush to him. Mr. Beak is extremely surprised to hear such accusations against him. Parrots don't like cheese. Mr. Beak might have forgotten the feather by the fridge, but eating cheese? No, that is impossible. Mr. Beak also becomes curious as to who has eaten Booba's favourite food, and he joins his friend's investigation. Booba, Lula and Mr. Beak return to the fridge. They examine everything again. While Booba paces back and forth, Lula and Mr. Beak watch him with interest. Booba looks like a grown-up, very serious detective. His friends wait to hear what he has to say. Finally, Booba stops. He has noticed colourful cubes scattered around the fridge. It's Noodle! Booba exclaims. Noodle loves to play with cubes and build some bizarre structures with them. Booba, Lula and Mr. Beak run to the couch where Noodle has created a whole fortress with a castle and an impressive protective wall. Noodle sits at the very top wearing a toy crown. Noodle says he knows nothing about the cheese. He is too small for such a big piece of cheese. Noodle is physically unable to eat it. Booba sighs. Will the identity of the cheese thief remain a mystery? Suddenly, Spike catches his attention. He is the last person Booba needs to speak to. And, after all, Spike's toy drone has been flying all over the place. Booba approaches him. Spike responds the same way everyone else did. He didn't take the cheese. Booba is upset. Now it's a dead end for sure. They will not be able to solve this mysterious case. Meanwhile, Lula catches the toy drone and discovers that it has a built-in video camera. It has recorded everything, and the crime is also caught on camera. Finding the cheese thief turns out to be very easy. All you have to do is watch the recording. This is exactly what the friends do. They rewind the tape to the moment when Lula placed a blank canvas on the easel and pressed the play button on the drone. From the video, they learn that when Spike called everyone outside for a walk, Booba stayed in the house because he was asleep. As soon as his friends left, Booba jumped out of his armchair and began to sleepwalk. His eyes were half closed and his arms stretched straight out in front of him. First, he walked over to the new canvas on the easel and drew a piece of cheese on it. Then Booba turned on the wall-mounted TV and started Mr. Beak's game. He danced so much with the teddy bear that it gave him a round of applause at the end. Booba scored the maximum number of points. Then he went behind the couch into Noodle's domain and completely rebuilt his fortress. It is thanks to Booba that a castle with high towers appeared in Noodle's fortress. Tired, Booba went to the fridge, opened the door, took out the tray with the cheese and ate it, leaving only the crust. Satisfied, he returned to his armchair and went to sleep. Lula turns off the video recording. Booba smiles with a guilty look. Such a plot twist even he wasn't expecting. Lula, Mr. Beak, Noodle and Spike give him an angry look. Booba thought his friends had taken the cheese, but it turned out to be his own fault. It is very frustrating. Booba is very ashamed of his behaviour. So, how does he apologise to his friends? A wonderful thought occurs to him. He runs up to the magic telescope. Booba uses it to explore every corner of the house. He finds strawberries, grapes, apples and bananas. He arranges them on beautiful plates, puts them on a tray and hurries to his friends. He gives strawberries to Lula, grapes to Mr. Beak, apples to Spike and bananas to Noodle. Everyone laughs and tucks in the fruit. Detective Booba has saved the day.